Well, this is Red Lobster, and we do things the Red Lobster way. Said by my manager before navigating us by the book straight into a blizzard of shit. This happened several years ago, and I am forever relieved I don't work in a restaurant anymore. Solidarity to all kitchen workers for the endless bullshit you have to deal with. At the time, I was working in the kitchen as an assembler. This can be one of the most clutch positions on the line, as you take all the food being prepared by the other cooks and organize it into tickets that can be taken out into the dining room. Accordingly, it is often a bottleneck for food leaving the kitchen. If you have a slow assembler, cooked food dies under the heating lamps, grilled salmon dries out, fries become soggy, linguine Alfredo hardens into concrete, really horrific shit. It is imperative that food not sit in the window. I was working a weekday lunch shift, which is normally pretty slow. We must have provoked the wrath of the restaurant gods on this day though, because out of nowhere the store got hit with a tsunami of customers. I could just barely make out the other cooks through the clouds of shrimp scampi, fryer grease, and cheddar bay biscuits flying through the air. I knew the shit blizzard was headed my direction, and began putting empty plates up in the window with the shape of each ticket that was to leave the kitchen, a technique I had learned to help survive bullshit like this. On the other side of the window, coordinating the servers, was my manager, Cuntface. Shouldn't use his real name, actually, let's call him Bob instead. Bob was a bit hyperactive and had an irritating tendency to micromanage kitchen processes, a problem compounded by his not knowing how the duck to run a kitchen. When I began putting empty plates in the window so that the incoming, interstellar-sized wave of seafood had something to land on, he stopped me. "What are you doing?" Bob asked. "I'm putting the plates and their sides in the window because we're about to have a very high volume of food coming through," I replied. "Well, this is Red Lobster, and here we do the things the Red Lobster way. We plate the food when the food is ready, and we don't put sides on early." I tried explaining that the Red Lobster way was designed by sentient suits and ties physically incapable of holding a spatula, that our sacred way, as dictated in the good book of employee training, had died in the trenches of last year's endless shrimp special, that, while I appreciated the job, I wasn't prepared for an honorable death at the hands of this rush to uphold its most obscure tenets. But he wasn't having any of it. Bob insisted that I take the plates out of the window and only pass him plates and tickets that were 100% completed. Knowing full well that Bob was flying us by the book into a storm of shit, I put on a feces-resistant raincoat, rubbed some Vicks under my nose, and braced for impact. 30 minutes later, the window was chaos. Finished food was left dying in the wings of the window, while I, swiftly enough to avoid reprimand, but with the fatalistic, mechanical motion of a flood pump removing water at a fraction of the rate at which it's arriving, plated up one finished ticket at a time. Bob was equal parts confused and furious, like a toddler whose toy was suddenly taken away. "What's this food waiting on?" he cried, gesturing towards a shriveled up steak and its associated sides. "Well, that order is waiting on some fried shrimp, and I need to wait for the ticket to be complete before I plate it up." "Why is the ticket missing fried shrimp?" "Unfortunately, I'm not manning the fryer, sir, so I don't know." This continued for the better part of an hour. It seemed like every ticket was missing one little thing that kept it from leaving the kitchen. After the rush had passed and I was dumping its precipitated, liquid shit from my galoshes, Bob approached me with the twitchy, nervous energy of a coked-up boxer. "Well, that, or a hyper-caffeinated, insecure manager who needed to assert his dominance over the underpaid crew of some bunk-ass seafood restaurant. Can I, speak to you in the walk-in for a moment, username?" "Sure thing." We walked to the cooler as I struggled to remember how to fight off an attacker armed with a kitchen knife from my days in Dish. "So, what happened back there?" Bob asked, arms folded, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "You said we should follow the system, and we did," I replied, mentally noting that he was standing in front of the walk-in's only exit, but there were a lot of missed items on those tickets. "We had food dying in the window." "I saw it, yeah. It was pretty bad." "So why was the food missing?" I don't know, I wasn't cooking the food, I was assembling it. I am the assembler. This line of questioning continued, with Bob trying to somehow pin the catastrophe of the last hour on my willingness to comply with his orders, while I blithely insisted that I did exactly what was asked of me. After not being able to move past this point for several minutes, Bob made some sweeping statement about doing better next time and left. Incidentally, the next time I was assembling and Bob was on the other side of the window, nothing was said about the Red Lobster way, and the rush went smoother, albeit with some hotter plates and servers having to return for delayed items. I guess we ended up doing better, after all. Now to the comments. As someone who both cooked and ran Expo in a Red Lobster, I felt this post in my soul. OP replied, "Solidarity, brother, hope you are in a better work environment now. Working in a zoo making food for the animals that talk, much more lax environment and I'm much happier. I hope you get out of there soon, my friend. I don't envy any of you behind the window staff. I have a hard enough time coordinating the timing on my dinner for two and I've been cooking for dang near 20 years. Thank goodness for air fryers and ovens that keep parts of the meal warm while I unduck the rest of it. That unduck the rest of it is absolutely perfect. Thanks for the unduck dinner username. Used to be a short order cook not long ago where the only manager over me was the owner. Small. Locally owned. The kitchen would run great until she decided she needed to come back to help. Anytime we actually got busy she'd freak out and tell all the servers to stop taking orders. I was never backed up enough to where I'd want to do that and we only had one flat top, 3 fryers, with enough seating for about 200 people. The moral of the story is, if you don't know how to run a kitchen, please stay out of the dang kitchen. Better yet, if you're in management, learn the kitchen even if you never have to work it. At Starbucks one time 2 days before the BOGO Frappuccino special, a district dude came in and completely reorganized our cold drink counter. Yeah. So, the whole staff, who all knew the mechanical motion of making the drinks, were all thrown out of rhythm because he thought his way of organizing things would be more efficient. You may be right, but this is not the time, dude. We were serving over 80 orders in a half hour during those specials. 2 people making fraps at a time. Caused absolute chaos. Died in the trenches of last year's endless shrimp special. LOL. OP replied. It may have been friendly fire. Ahem. Friendly fire. I'm so sorry. Duck you Red Lobster. Source, used to work there and quit. Set a lobster free on my way out. Worked there for 5 years. Worst job ever. Got a $10 check from a class action lawsuit about wage theft a few years ago. What are you going to do with such wealth? Worked in restaurants for 10 years, worked in corporate restaurants for 5, and I can tell you what OP already knows, that corporate restaurants are run by absolute buffoons who have no idea what the duck actually goes on. This is true of almost every industry. Any company that gets big enough to have a discernible level of middle management is, ipso facto, managed and run by people who have absolutely no idea what it takes to actually do the jobs that produce the money the business earns. Yeah, like the base level manager at Amazon is majority of the time some fresh out of college person that has never set foot in any warehouse, much less an Amazon warehouse. They get a 2-week, I think, crash course in it all, but that doesn't make them any less clueless. God, I worked in restaurants for years and I felt this in my soul. If I had $1 for every manager I worked with who was navigating a shift straight into a blizzard of shit, I could have quit years earlier than I did. Great writing, OP. I could smell the grease and hear the cooks swearing a blue streak in the background. Only time I ever told someone who didn't deserve it to go duck themselves, it was two of us manning the whole kitchen. I had a bunch of shit in ovens while I was also doing expo, other guy was stuck online, and a server pinned a bunch of short order tickets to the short order wheel. At the end of that rush, I lost a ticket and a server asked me what table it was going to, and I told her I didn't even remember my own name, much less which table the plate needed to go. I assume it got there. I have very little memory of that night.